the 757. I'm talking about the one and only. You know her as Georgia Allen. How you doing?
Absolutely wonderful. Hello, hello, hello. It is Thursday at noon. How
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
yeah.
It's so great to see you. As always, I bring you greetings. It is Thursday, and I am Georgia F. Allen, your noonday host for GA for Just Is, because it just is the right time to do that which is right. As always, we want to thank Henderson Vaughn, aka Captain 85, aka the Dream Maker, who continues to open up the airwaves to bring our listening audience a conversation for information, a conversation for correction, as well as a conversation for transformation. We're excited about this week's show because, as you know, Virginia just had an election, and we have elections every year. And the topic today is elections are over. Now what? Now, what are we going to do next? Are we going to sit around and wait until next November, or are we going to get actively involved right now? And I always believe that the minute elections are called, that they are over, you go to sleep that night and get up the next day, and you're already preparing for the next election. And the reason why that is important is because you cannot wait until September, October, November of the following year to say, well, let me get engaged and let me find out who's running and let me find out this or that or the third. And again, that is critically important because all cities do things differently. And in our case, there are always elections. Always. We have elections every year. As a matter of fact, in our case, coming up in January, on January the 9th, we have a special election to replace the representative for District 1. And the reason why we have to replace a representative is the gentleman resigned from the city council and was selected to be the interim sheriff for the city of Virginia Beach. And so when things like that happens, that now opens up a slot. You now have more candidates that are about to run for office. And when all of that takes place, you need candidates to run. Well, in this particular case, we have four candidates that are going to be running for the district seat. One gentleman is a former fire chief for the city of Virginia Beach. We have a young lady who's a former librarian. One person is former military, and the other person I can't remember um, who who they represented. But the thing of it is, you want to find out a little bit about these candidates because if you live in District 1, you want to know who these people are. Now, the one thing that I saw in this particular race, and for those of you who are living in Virginia Beach, I'm strictly talking about Virginia Beach right now. I'm not talking about the rest of the state or the rest of the country. I'm simply focusing on District 1 in the city of Virginia Beach. And what I saw with this Henderson is it's almost like we went to sleep on this. There are four candidates in that race, and not one candidate is a person of color that I could find. I looked to find out who these people are and everything. One person, uh, president of Woodstock Civic League, which is over in that district. You know, um, one person grew up in the city, first in her family to graduate from college. And so they have interesting backgrounds and everything, but we didn't put anybody in the race.
Wow.
And so when people are out here working to try to open up doors of opportunity, when those doors are open, we also have a responsibility to not fall asleep during these times. Because even if we put a person in the race and they did not win, what happens is because they take that first step campaigning, that first step of making their case, and the first step of introducing themselves to the community, even if they don't win, because they were out there, they have an opportunity to perhaps win another time.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, we want to remind people that every election is important. And now that we have district races instead of having to run citywide, the districts are much smaller. They only have like 40 some thousand people per district. And of that 40 some thousand people, only 30 some thousand are eligible voters, are eligible voting age.
Okay.
That means that they are eligible to vote, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all 30 some thousand people are registered and are able to vote. So you want to keep that in mind. So you might only be campaigning to 20 some thousand people. You may not be campaigning to an entire electorate of 30 some thousand people. So that's the other thing you want to keep in mind. Um, when I came on and I wanted to talk about now what, I felt like there was a need to go back in the city of Virginia Beach and take a look back a few years. And I'm going to go back to the year 2000, when we had the census. Every 10 years, there's a census. So in
Mhm.
the year 2000, there was a census done. Well, in 2001, there were a group of us of all different races, creeds, colors that came together, and we called ourselves the Coalition for a Better Virginia Beach. And what we did is we spoke before council, we spoke before our representatives to try to get Virginia Beach to change their election system. And we worked on that for a minute. Each decided that they would not change. And here again, elections over. Now what? We decided that we would fight. Again, we have elections every year, okay? Every single year. And we decided to fight to have fair representation, have single member districts. It didn't go through. So in the year 2005, I ran for the House of Delegates. Now, I did not win the seat, but what it did, it engaged the community and got more and more people ready to go out, participate in the election process. And we even started getting people to run for office. Then a few years later, in 2008, I ran again, but this time I ran for city council, which was the entire city. If you run for House of Delegates, you don't have to run in the district.
Oh, okay.
Makes it a lot easier. When you run for city council, the way the previous election was drawn and the way it was done previously, you had to run in the whole entire city. So I was all over the whole entire city, met people and everything. But it was also the same year that President Obama ran for president of the United States. So while I got a good, strong showing, I didn't have the type of money that my opponent had, where they were getting these big dollars from these businesses and restaurants and hotel and motel and all of this. You
Right.
know, I just ran a plain old grassroots campaign. Within 2 years later, it's 2010. It is another census time. Another time for census. What happens when we have a census? It's a time to redraw districts. It's a time to look at how the city is structured. Are there any changes that we need to make? So every time there is a census, there's also generally opportunities. And so that's why a lot of times you will see communities focus more on elections right after the census. So what did we do as a group? In 2011, we held public hearings again on redistricting. And I'm sharing this story with you because when people have elections, they think it's a snap of the finger. And so I'm letting you know now what? Things needs to be done. You need to do some work. You can't expect that everything is going to fall into your lap because it doesn't. Now, what is the work that you're willing to do to make a change in your respective community, in your respective city, your neighborhood, or whatever? What are you willing to do? So in 2011, we went through the public hearing. We went to the General Assembly. Many of us spoke. I went back and pulled the data, and some people like Dr. Van Spiver. I saw Dr. Rudy Wilson, political head of the political science department at Norfolk State University, who came before our city council to speak on behalf of the city changing their election system. So we go from 2000 to 2010, okay, to 2011. Time is passing, correct?
Right.
Well, guess what happened in 2019? The lawsuit was filed. Virginia Beach, you have a warped election system, and you are violating the Voting Rights Act. So in 2019, the lawsuit was filed. In 2020, what happened? Another census. So you can see 2000, 2010, now we're in 2020. Okay.
Okay.
So things take time. So for those of you who think that you can just do things in a snap of a finger, no. Every 10 years, there's a census. Every time we have an election, there's a time to change policies. Every time there's an election, there's a time to improve what we have currently. There's a time to revise what is taking place and making it better. And sometimes we just need to restructure and rewire the whole thing. Well, that's what happened when the lawsuit came about. And so in 2020, in 2019 was the filing of the lawsuit. In 2020, there was another census. And in the year 2021, April 1st, the judge rules in the favor of the plaintiffs that Virginia Beach is violating the Voting Rights Act. And so with that, we were able to draw new districts. We were able to change the landscape of Virginia Beach, both on the local as well as the state level. Why is that important? One of the people that said that they're running for that District 1, they ran the first time and they're going to run again. And you know why they're running? Because they don't have to run in the entire city, and it's cost effective to run in a district than it is to run in the city of over 460 some thousand people. So I just kind of want to share this with those to the listening audience. Those of you who are listening, whether you listen now or you listen later, you need to understand that you got to focus on a process. See, we never stopped the process. We did not stop going before council. We did not stop going before our General Assembly. We did not stop pushing to change the election system. But we had a process, we had a strategy, we had tactics, but more importantly, we had tenacity, meaning we were not going to quit. Now, have we lost people along the way? Absolutely. We've lost several people who have passed on, but those people were on the front lines right along with us. And so we can now say to them, even though they're not here, but when we do what we do, and we take that bottle and we do the bottle where we pay tribute to our ancestors. That is what I see with this election. That is what I see is we stayed the course. We did not quit. We did not waver. We did not complain, well, it didn't work this time. But we stayed in it for the long haul. And there's many of us who are still around, who were there at the beginning and who continue to press forward. And I say that to all of the young people who may be listening. Don't give up. Don't quit. So I'm going to kind of share with you, because after the new districts have drawn, let me kind of share with you what has taken place because we did not quit. Let me share with you what has taken place because we continue to follow the process. Let me share with you what has happened because we stayed with our strategy, we kept with our tactics, and we never lost our faith in the ability to change things for the better for those of you who are coming behind us. So, first, we elect 3 African American on city council at one time. Never before in the history had that ever happened. So we already had 1 African American on city council. So with the election, we now have 4 African Americans elected, not appointed, not selected, but elected to office because of the tenacity of persons like Carl Wright, persons like our own Captain 85, Henderson Vaughn, persons like A. Bruce Williams, who's no longer with us, but he was there every step of the way until he could no longer be with us. Persons like Dr. Van Spiver and Dr. Charles Flowers. Those men stood up with us when we were fighting to change the outcome and change how our city was structured. Because the way our city was structured was not necessarily in the best interest of those of us who were paying taxes. We had, we were being taxed without representation. Not 1 year, not 2 year, but for decades, we were being taxed without representation. So, with the change, with the lawsuit, with all the different things that we did not quit because we went before council and council um, put put the um, when they put a thing on the ballot, they put a ballot initiative on the ballot. And once we had said this is what we want, there were folks in our city say, "Oh no, no, no. Let's change the wording of the ballot initiative." And they did. And so first the people have voted so that they would have representation in single member districts. But because the craftiness of those who were elected in our General Assembly at the time, they changed the ballot initiative wording. And so the second time, the people voted against that. So that's the other thing that we have to be very careful of. Wherever you live, you want to be very careful of who you elect on all levels. Because if we had had a strong, supportive General Assembly in the city where we live, where we would have people who understood the magnitude and the importance of it, when the citizen voted to change the election system to a single member district, they would not have had to suffer through another 10, 15, almost 20 years of continuing to have an election system that was citywide, where you had to run in an entire city, miles upon miles upon miles of going from district to district, from neighborhood to neighborhood. But because we did not have a strong General Assembly that supported the things that we cared about, they changed the wording. They changed the ballot initiative. And with that change, they went back to General Assembly and they said, this is the way we're going to keep this in place. Now, they didn't do that when the people voted and said they wanted a change and they wanted single member districts. No, they went back to the General Assembly and made a law when things were changed in the manner that they wanted it. So when you hear people say, well, why should I vote? And nothing happens when I vote. Well, we lived through it personally. Am I right, Henderson?
Yeah.
We lived through them changing a ballot initiative and rewording the initiative to confuse the public because the public voted. They voted to have single member districts years ago. Years ago. But the folks who were supposed to be our representatives didn't want it. So they said, to heck with what the people want. We're smarter than you are. So we're going to do what we want because what we want is far better than the person who is a school teacher or the person who's a firefighter or the person who owns a small business or a barber shop or a beauty salon or a small restaurant. Our elected officials decided that they were smarter than we were. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible. Well, the outcome, yes.
I wanted to ask the question. You said the census is every 10 years?
Every 10 years.
So they're doing a census now, right?
No, we just did it. We do it every 10 years. 2000, 2010, then 2020. The next one is 2030. That's our next census.
The lady just called me the other day.
Oh, they do that all the time.
Oh, okay.
That's not the census that is done nationwide.
Oh, nationwide.
That's the census that they're doing, just trying to get a temperature of what people are feeling and things of that nature.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to know.
That's not the national census. I know.
Okay.
Yeah, they kind of confuse you sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah. So go ahead.
I said they might be trying to put a rope-a-dope in there for the presidency.
Hey, let me tell you. Yeah, that's why you cannot believe all these polls that come out.
Mm-hmm.
Because according to the polls, everything was a lost cause last week. Everything. All the states, they were all lost causes. The Commonwealth of Virginia, that was a lost cause. President Biden is at the lowest points in his presidency, and there's nothing that he can do. Lost cause. Everything was a lost cause. But the people said something different.
Hello.
The people said they would go out and they would vote, and they would vote in a manner that they felt was in their best interest. And that's where we have to make sure that when we're talking to the constituents, when we're talking to our neighbors, we have to speak to them in a language that they understand, and they understand Social Security.
Hello.
Because if their parents lose their Social Security check or their parents lose their Medicare, guess what?
They're going to be moving in with them.
They might have to move in with you. They may have to move in with you. So understand policy versus persons. Okay, you might like this person over here, or you might like this party over here, or what have you, but understand policy and then delve through the policy and decide what policy will work in your favor and which policies will not. Who is willing to champion the policies that you care about and who's not? So that's what elections really are about. So, with that being said, what happened on the state level? On the state level, because we were engaged, because we were voting, we now have a brand new Speaker of the House of Delegates named Don Scott.
P-Town in the building.
P-Town.
That's right.
Okay. We have Senator Louise Lucas, who will probably be head of the Appropriation Committee.
P-Town in the building.
P-Town again. But throughout Hampton Roads, we have a larger group of persons from our own community who was elected to office. In Virginia Beach alone, we have 2 brand new delegates.
Hello.
Okay, who are African American, and a state senator.
Hello.
Who is African American. Okay. Never before in the history of Virginia Beach have we ever had persons who were actually from Virginia Beach, other than when Alex was elected from Virginia Beach. Did we have people representing us in the state legislature? Whenever we had representation, they were always from Norfolk, and they carved a piece of Virginia Beach out in the Norfolk district.
Right.
And so for years and years and years, our local government used that to suggest that the Black community had representation. But the representation were only the district lines that backed up to the city of Norfolk.
Yeah.
Well, if they were the representative that lived in Norfolk, grew up in Norfolk, their priorities was probably more Norfolk than they were Virginia Beach. Taking nothing away from the representation or anything like that. But if you live in a city and you only have a carve out of a portion of another city, chances are you're going to be engaged with the people where your district is mostly located. You're going to know those people a lot better than you do the people who are what I call a carve out. Now, this change means that because of the election system, instead of a governor controlling, everything, or controlling the executive branch and one of the legislative branches, he now has to come back and work together with both the House of Delegates and the state Senate of our General Assembly in order to make changes or in order to pass legislation. And so now he has to hear from the people, and he cannot say, because I don't want this book in a school, this is the way it's going to go, because I control the executive branch, I control the lieutenant governor, I control the attorney general, I control the state delegates, I control the state senate. So in the Commonwealth of Virginia, okay, whether you like one party more than another party, a lot of times it's good to have somewhat of a split government if the government is more interested in working in a manner that is not truly listening to the people. And I say that because a lot of times, if one person has an issue, they can turn that into a sound bite that would make you think that 50% of the state has that same issue, when it's only a handful of people who have that issue. And so your policy and legislation can ultimately change because one person got a feather up their nose and decided to just complain. And instead of trying to fix it in the area where that person is located, they decide that this becomes a statewide issue. And so now we're going to disrupt what does not need to be disrupted. And so for those of you who are listening, please stay engaged. Yes, there was an election, and yes, a lot of the people that you probably voted for and support won. But guess what? Nothing is going to get done unless you remain engaged, especially not the things you would like to have done. You got something to share, Henderson?
No, I'm listening. You're right. I agree with you. You got to keep calling these cats.
Yeah. Now, we also had, once the election is over, of course, I just shared with you that the Speaker of the House was selected. And so the majority leader also has to be selected on the Senate side. Well, the person who was selected as a majority leader, so that those of you who are in Virginia knows, is Senator Scott A. Sorovell. Now, I don't know Scott Sorovell because keep in mind, these are people all over the whole entire state. But I do know he's from the Fairfax area. The Prince William is part of his area. Now, locally, we had Senator Mamie Locke also running for that position. And people are like, well, Dad, why didn't they select Mamie Locke? You have to keep in mind, if you already have the House of Delegate, Speaker of the House of Delegate is from Hampton Roads, the chances are they're going to negotiate and say, okay, look, let's do this way. Let's not have everybody from one section of the state when the state is millions of people. So when you first hear that he won the seat, people probably said, well, that's not right.
Right.
Why did immediately they'll be thinking, well, that's not right. Well, when I looked at it and I looked at all the power brokers that we have right here in Hampton Roads, I said, chances are they're saying, wait a minute, we can't have all of the power in one location. We need to kind of spread it out throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia so that everybody can have a voice, which makes sense. Because if you remember when I first got started about now that the election is over, now what? I talked about the city of Virginia Beach and how elections were done. And so in many instances, we would have a cluster of people all in the same neighborhood serving on our city council, leaving out the rest of the city. Because if people ran at large and then they ran in districts, there was nothing to stop one person running a district, but two people who are their neighbors run at large, and all three of them are serving on the same city council. So now you got a cluster of folks serving on council, but the rest of the city is not being represented. So I understand why they probably selected the gentleman from the Northern Virginia area in order to kind of spread the representation. And so we're hearing from each other. So now what simply means you want to make sure that you stay engaged so that when people are selected and people are put in spaces that you can understand, you can reason why that might be. But if you're not engaged, you would probably say, well, why didn't they select Senator Locke? Well, and I can't tell you which one has been there longer. I'm not sure if it's Senator Locke or Sorovell, because again, like I said, I don't know him. We're learning about a lot of new people. This is a new election, and there are new people that ran for office. And so we want to make sure that we don't get a feather up our nose because we think this person should be there versus this one.
Right.
What I like for people to do is to remember that between now and the end of the month, if there are things that you strongly feel that you would like your representative to work on, to maybe put in legislation, change some policies or whatever, now's the time because they need that information before November the 30th. Because once they get it, they then have to go through and identify, is there a way for us to make that policy? Can I have some other people who will be willing to co-sponsor it? Do I have the team who can do the investigative work to identify how best to write that piece of legislation? So not only is it in your best interest, those of you who have come up with this idea, but it's in the best interest of us all statewide. because sometimes we think that just because we want something, that's the most important thing in the world, but we don't go through the processes. If you remember, when I talked to you about it, when I opened up the show today, the things that we were able to change was because we did a few things. We focus on process. We focus on strategies. We focus on tactics, but we stayed tenacious. And so if there are things that you like to see change, you're going to have to be willing to go to stay for the long haul. And many people are not interested in staying in anything for the long haul. They want to jump in, tell somebody to do something. They don't want to follow up. They don't want to follow through. They don't want to do any of these things. In order to be successful, when you're looking at legislation, you have to be willing to follow up and follow through. That's the now what. That's the now what. Okay. There has to be a follow up. Okay. Now that the election over, it has to be a follow up. That's the now what. There has to be a follow through. That is a now what. What do? We follow up. We follow through. I'm going to take a moment to do an announcement. I've tried to put announcements as one of the things that we do with the show. And we have an upcoming event. It's December the 12th, and it's at New Hope Baptist Church, and it starts at 6:30 p.m. and it talks about filing taxes. Now, Juanita Williams is a retired Navy chief, former constituent service director for Congresswoman Elaine Loria, and she wants to invite you to come and discuss various topics concerning our community, and more discussions will be held throughout every month. And we call it Wisdom of Juanita. And the reason why we like to announce this is because by her serving in a congressional office, she was able to gain access to information that we may not know. And she uses this time to better educate the community. But just sharing information with you and you don't use it or you don't pass it on, I won't say it's a waste of time, but it's critically important that we value the time that people are willing to give. Because as a retired military person, as a former constituent service director for a congressperson, Juanita can be doing anything. She does not have to take time out of her schedule to serve the community, but she's service oriented, and that's what she enjoys doing. So if you are available December the 12th, you can go to New Hope Baptist Church in Virginia Beach for Old Great Neck Road. It is at 6:30, and she's going to be talking to you about filing taxes, and that's December. Why is that important? Because at the end of December, they're supposed to get you your information, or the end of January. This everybody that you've worked for should have forwarded you your tax information. And April the 15th, you should file your taxes. So what best time to talk to someone and ask questions of them than in December? Get ready to do what you're going to have to do anyway. But get ready by getting knowledge from someone who has been around a long time and can share some valuable information with you. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about that election last week. And what I did is I took some time out to just kind of get the unofficial results. And the reason why I say unofficial, because a lot of times when it comes to elections, they still have to be certified by every registrar's office. So in the city of Virginia Beach, it would be certified by our Virginia Registrar's Office. You go online, and once they do the actual certification, after all the votes have been tallied and counted, any any people who may have voted on the day of, who may have registered and voted on the day of, those people do have to be verified, and that will determine whether or not those votes are actually counted now, or if that person may have to do some things to be legit. So it doesn't mean that someone is trying to commit fraud, because that's the first thing that a lot of people say. Oh, they were fraudulent in their voting. It's only fraud if the vote is counted. If they take the vote off of the records and they identify that that person couldn't vote, not because they were trying to commit fraud, but perhaps because they didn't realize maybe some of their things that they thought was in place was not actually in place. Sort of like in the past, Governor Tim Kaine, Governor McDonald, Governor Northam, Governor Warner, most of those governors did an automatic restoration of voting rights. The governor that is currently in office asks you to file paperwork to get your rights restored. Well, someone who was accustomed to people automatically restoring their rights could have gone down to vote. Some of the people we've discovered that he removed legitimate people whose rights had been restored, who were legal voters. He actually removed them from the voting rolls.
Wow.
Unfortunately, and so the NAACP is now in a battle with our current governor. Okay, and so people who should have been able to vote temporarily lost their voting rights for an election because of what the governor did or did not do. And so keep in mind, before people, hair gets on fire and they say, oh, there was a fraudulent vote. If I knew and everything was up to date, and all of a sudden you decide, well, no, I'm just going to remove all of these people, but I didn't get notified that I was being removed, then that is not on me. That is on the people who are responsible for ensuring that I'm able to vote. That's not on me. Okay. And that is not fraudulent. Okay. Last week voting, we had District 19, and we had a young lady by the name of Christy Newcraig and another young lady by the name of Myra Payne. Christy got 34,796 votes to Miss Payne's 24,564 votes. So the winner had 58.46% of the vote, and the person who was not the winner, because I don't like to use the L word, I just don't. There's a winner and someone who did not win. Okay. 41.27% of the vote. But when you looked at the financing, one candidate that got 58% of the vote, the money showed up as $260,255. I'm sitting going, why does someone need $260,000 to run a state legislative campaign? And that's quite unfortunate. Okay. And there were people that had spent even more than that in this race. And that's on both sides. Okay. That wasn't just on one side, that was on both sides. And part of the problem is we don't have any election finance laws, because to run for a state seat should not require $250,000+ It shouldn't. It should not require $250,000+ Now, is that something that we as a community want to take before our legislators and say, hey, is there a way that we can run campaigns where we don't have to spend millions of dollars? Now, the next campaign, the winner got 36,179 votes. The non-winner got 26,935 votes. The winner was William DeSteff, who is a current senator, and the person who did not win is Victoria Luvanos. Yeah, Luvanos. Trying to get my Spanish back again. Now, Mr. DeSteff finance amount was $1,338,369. The non-winner had $20,010, but he only got 10,000 more votes than she did.
Hey, I just needed
$1.3 million. And I say that to the listening audience because if you feel like I feel, we probably need to come up with a better way to run for office so that there is not so much money being raised to run for these local offices, these state legislature offices. I'm just going to focus on our state. I'm not going to focus on federal finance reform, local and state. In the Kevin Adams race against Aaron Rouse, and Aaron was the incumbent, Kevin got 24,082 votes. Aaron got 29,261. Now, these are unofficial results, but because of the way things are done, both of them had to spend or get over $1 million to run this race. Now, Aaron received 54.78% of the vote, while Kevin received 45.8% of the vote. Kevin had $1,088,700. Aaron had $1,490,637. And again, keep in mind, these are unofficial numbers. Unofficial numbers. Unofficial numbers. And I'm sharing this because I want people to understand how costly it is to run for office. And it should not be. I want to say back in the day when I ran for office, I think I had like $25,000 to the guy that ran against me. He probably had close to $250,000. Okay. Now, Alex, who did not have an opponent, but because he's been able, he had run before, he did have a large donor population. So he got 12,327 votes. But he got 88%, and I don't understand this. He got 88% of the voting populace. And then he raised $907 without an opponent. So he still had to do work. It's no walking into a position. You still have to do work. Okay, I'm looking at my time. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of them really quick. Then we had our next three candidates. They ran in the same district, and that was district number 96. Michael Karslek, Kelly Covis Fowler, and she's considered the incumbent. And then there was an independent. Mike got 8,644 votes. Kelly got 11,455, and the independent got 719 votes. Kelly, who's the incumbent, got 54.92%. Her stronger opponent got 41.44%, and the gentleman who ran as an independent got 3.45%. Kelly raised over $400,000. Her strongest opponent raised $113,000. And then the young person, the independent, raised $4,183. Then we had the incumbent again, Karen Greenlaw. She got 11,430 votes. Micah Fagans got 12,427 votes. So Mike beat the incumbent in this case scenario. He ended up with 52.3% of the vote, while she ended up with 47.86% of the vote. She raised $2,787,182. He raised $3,255,257. Now, one thing that I noticed about Michael's, he got a lot of in-kind services. So all of his was not dollars and cents. A lot of his were in kind. There were people who may have supported him with campaign signs, or they may have supported him with other types of material or what have you. And so I thought that was quite interesting. Barry Knight, who's an incumbent, he had no opponent like Alex did. He got 17,251 votes in District number 98. He got 89% of the vote. He had $1,854,728. No opponent.
Mm.
No opponent. Then we had another team, Ann Tata and Kat Porterfield, District number 99. Ann got 14,964 votes. Kat got 10,964. Now, I want to say this is a new district. Okay. And so there was no incumbent, if I recall correctly. Ann Tata ended up with 57% of the vote, while Kat ended up with 42% of the vote. Tata, however, raised $473,401. Kat raised $25,297. So if you kind of see where I'm coming from, then the last race was Robert Bloxham, who's the incumbent, against Charlena Jones, who was the opponent. He got 15,000, and this is District 100, 15,545 votes. She got 10,381 votes. He won the race by 59.88% of the vote. She got 39.99% of the vote, which is almost 40%, which is always good if you're a first-time candidate. He had $219,601 compared to her $11,322. And again, these are unofficial results because, of course, you're shaking your head. Of course, all the finances haven't been turned in, and they haven't closed out the books on this. But I just wanted to share that with those of you who may be looking to run for office, those of you who may be interested in getting involved in politics. And when you first look at these numbers, it may sound a little scary. But I looked at Myra Payne winning 41% of the vote, and Victoria winning 42% of the vote. And I looked at Kat winning 42% of the vote compared to the type of money that their opponent had. Aaron and Kevin, they were close in fundraising. They were both very close in fundraising. It wasn't a big, a substantial difference in the two of their fundraising. But as you can see, there were candidates who outraised their opponents substantially. And what we want to look at is if their opponent is still getting close to 40-some% of the vote, is there something different that can be done if the candidate who won is not a candidate that you feel is someone who will work in your best interest? So I wanted to share those numbers because, again, election's over. Now what? So the now what is, take a look, for those of you who are in our city, go online and take a look at the returns on the elections. And if you live in any of those districts, you want to think about, is that something that I would like to do? And after looking at these numbers and looking at the amount of money that's being raised and looking at the amount of votes, you can kind of identify about how many votes you need in order to win an election. So do you have a strategy to make that happen? So we are coming to the close of the show today,
Yep.
but I just could not resist giving you guys a snapshot of elections because I think we've spent so much time and we're word sick that we need to have all of this money in order to put up a good fight. And I hope by sharing with you someone who raised $219,000 versus someone that raised 11,000, or someone who raised $473,000 compared to someone who raised $25,000, and then they only won their seat by 4,000 votes or 5,000 votes. Uh, you know, that's not a lot of votes, y'all. That is not a lot of votes. So can you go out and find six? If you lost, if you didn't win by 5,000 votes, can you go out there and find yourself 6,000 votes to go along with the 24,000 that you had already? Because we need people to start thinking differently. And that's the point of this show. A lot of shows come out and they repeat what they heard someone else say. I try not to do that. I try really, really hard not to just go out and mimic what I've heard on all of these networks. I try to look at it and kind of drill down to not the lowest denominator, but closer to the people, closer to the constituent, closer to the citizens, and look at ways that we can readdress some of the things that are taking place and changing the outcomes. So with that being said, we just celebrated our veterans. Unfortunately, in the city of Virginia Beach, they had the Confederacy rolling their floats down on the ocean front. Yes, they did. That's unfortunate. This is my city. And so we want to make people aware of things that are taking place in their local government and their local cities. And then the other thing is next week is Giving Thanks Day. Are we going to be on the air next week? Or are we going to forego Giving Thanks Day?
That's your day. You could tell me. We can rerun.
So just let me know. Send me a message. If so, we will put something out, let you know what we're going to be doing. But again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. I hope this has been of value to you. And I hope it'll push you to do something in your community. With that being said, this is Georgia Allen with GA for Justice, always coming to you, hopefully with information, correction, and transformation. Have a great week.
Thank you once again. And thank you for listening and watching. And please share this with friends, family members, and anybody on your social media platform that's concerned about the community, as the community activist, Ms. Georgia Allen, who takes a lot of time out of her busy schedule to inform and keep you activated in the place where you need to be, the community. Until next Thursday, remember, it's GA for Justice from 12 until 1. Until then, thank you very much for watching and viewing.
Bye.